I'm Steve Vibronics, and this is the Life in Dub podcast, talking to people who live their lives in dub and reggae. Episode number 28. Welcome to the 28th episode of the Life in Dub podcast. I hope you're all doing okay out there. Thanks to everyone that showed their appreciation for the return of Life in Dub. It's always great to hear that you're listening and enjoying the podcast out there. So keep spreading the word and always get in touch if you want to let me know your thoughts about any of the episodes. And remember, you can go back and listen to any of the previous 27 episodes at lifeindub.com or wherever you choose to listen to your podcasts. This week, I want to talk about something for the last time. That's because this week sees the release of the last in the current series of the Scoops Gold Disc Classic series. That's the series of reissues that I've been working on over the last year. The last in this series is China Rock, a tune that originally came out on the Jar Tubbies label back in 2008. The Jar Tubbies label has a reputation for putting out great music for the longest time, so it's always an honour to be involved in their releases. But as each release is on a limited press, they sell out really quickly and become highly sought after collector's items in no time. China Rock is no exception, and I've been asked about it countless times over the last 10 years. It's a pure digital sound system tune for those 4 a.m. times in the dance, heavy and melodic, and a track I still love to listen to now, so it seemed perfect for a reissue. I even managed to find a previously unreleased dubplate mix of China Rock in the archive, so you can find that on the B-side. It's the final Scoops Gold Disc Classic for now, and you can pick up a copy of China Rock on Bandcamp or at vibronics.co.uk. Next out on Scoops will be some new productions, but more about that later. This week, my guest is Martin Campbell, a vocalist and producer with an unmistakable voice and musical style. I think it's fair to say that Martin Campbell is something of an enigma, the veteran white singer with a direct link to the Channel 1 recording studio in Jamaica. I've loved his work for as long as I can remember and was first hypnotised by the timeless Foundation track Wicked Rule maybe 30 years ago. It was a real treat to get to know more about Martin and his life in reggae, and he shares so many great stories in this conversation. So enough of me, let's get on with the interview. So, Martin Campbell, welcome to the Life in Dub podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure.
First face-to-face interview I've done for a while. Everything else has been done remotely, so it's nice to kind of actually have a normal conversation. And what I do at the start of each podcast, I kick it off with the same question that I ask everyone, which is the name and important track question. So it's just, just a way to introduce yourself and talk about the music, but like to name a track that's been really influential and really kind of left an impression on you. So yeah, have you got a track you'd want to mention?
Yeah, the most influential track is from, I think it was 1980 or 1981, which was General, done by Dennis Brown in Channel 1. And at that time, I think Sly and Robbie kind of stripped the rhythm right out. So it's very basic. And that's what became the basis for my kind of layout in the rhythms that I do. I like to keep them very, very sparse, but very well recorded.
And what a great vocal on a rhythm as well. It's like they're kind of made for each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And hasn't that rhythm, has it got some like sin drums and things on it? It's got like it's a wicked production.
Yeah, they did fit it. Sly at the time was always saying that reggae has to keep up with the times. And in America, the American music was beginning to feature those kind of electronic sin drums they were using. So yeah, that rhythm's got it in there as well. But it was the sound that they were getting on just the basic drum kit, the emptiness of it.
And it's that like, we were just talking earlier on, I did a bit of recording with Matthew and Fluxy recently, and it's like when you've got a drummer of that calibre, then, how do I get the drum sound? How do I do that? You just get a great drummer and you sit them in front of a kit and they sound like that.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although I'll tell you a story that Ernest Hookim, who was one of the Hookim brothers in Channel 1, he would spend hours, even a whole day, just recording Sly on the drum kit, moving the mics, dampening up the snare, putting some more cloth in the kick drum. He spent a lot of time around about that time in the early 80s, late 70s,
Well, the thing about having a studio where you specialise in something like that is that you can just fine tune, and it's like you might not. I mean, I know they had great equipment as well, but it's also more about getting the absolute best out of what you've got, I guess.
Yes, I mean, I remember Ernest used to say that if you listen to the drum sound on American records, the sound that we were getting in Jamaica it wasn't good enough. It had to compete more with the American sound, and that's when they started working on the drum kits. I can remember I used to get a magazine back then. It was called Studio Sound, and it was a professional recording sound. I don't know if you know that magazine.
No, I don't know that magazine.
It was called Studio Sound, and it was professional. It had all the modern stuff, the gear, everything in there. And Ernest used to read them, and he used to look at the microphones, and he began to get a better understanding of what was required to get that change of the sound in the drums, which Channel One were very famous for, because they really changed the sound of the drum and the bass in Jamaica.
Yes, it's incredible. And when you listen to those recordings, it's like, I mean, obviously reggae music's all about the drums and the bass and about getting that rhythm over, but you can hear it so fat in those recordings. But what I'd like to ask you about is about yourself and how you started out. So, and there's talk, you're already talking about being in Jamaica and stuff like that. So how did your musical journey all start out?
Well, I knew Jojo, who was the eldest brother who actually built Channel One. He was the one that had the idea in the first place. He was the one that wanted to do it. And the other brothers kind of fell into place afterwards. But from that, I really had a love of music. My musical journey first started when I was in the cadets, the Scouts in Jamaica. And we had a flute band.
So how old were you when you were in Jamaica in this time?
I would have been at the time of the flute band, the Scouts. I probably was around about 7 to 8 years old then. Yeah.
And what was it like in Jamaica when you were 7 years old? I mean,
well, it was a little bit different to how it is now. It was still not too long finished with the British, governing the place. So it kind of had a different vibe to it. It was still the place was still quite alive. I think there was probably a little less poverty like what you see today when you go to Kingston. The roads were better maintained. Everything was still pretty well maintained from when the British had handed it over. So that was in the middle to late 60s.
And then you were playing music in the Scouts?
I was playing drums. I was a drummer. And funny enough, I remember I was chatting to Style Scott, who was another famous drummer from Channel One, and he told me that he started in the army, in drum corps in the army. What
a Style Scott! I mean, I'm such a big fan of the Radix sound and
Me
that
too.
approach.
Yeah.
It's like incredible drummer.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
A great loss to music, definitely.
Absolutely.
When he passed.
Yeah.
So you were in Jamaica, like kind of before roots reggae, as we know it, even
Yes.
existed then.
Yeah.
So were you there, like when it started to appear, and were you still there?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What was going on then? I mean,
Well,
do you remember that sort of?
Yeah.
transition?
I mean, you had Striker Lee, Bunny Lee was doing a lot of productions back then, and the pace of the music was quite slow, and it was just gradually. I think it was the chords they were playing and the bass lines. They just started to become more minor chords, and that's how the roots thing developed. And it came to its fore probably around 1975, 76.
And as you kind of start to grow up in Jamaica, then when did you get involved in music, visit studios? I mean, it's quite a transition from being a scout to being hanging out at Channel One.
Yeah, as I got older, I started to go to Channel One with Jojo and that, and I just loved what they were doing down there. I started to realise that it's something that I wanted to do. Well, I felt I wanted to do. In fact, I can remember once saying to Jojo, this is at a later period, by the way, now, in the early 80s when the dancehall thing was coming. I remember saying to Jojo, they're singing off the top of their heads. They're not writing the lyrics out anymore. It's only people like Gregory, Dennis Brown.
Putting pen to paper.
Yes. These youths were coming in hungry, no shoes on their feet, but looking to try and get a break. And they were just singing off the top of their heads over a rhythm, probably a Junja Laws rhythm or something. So, yeah, I diverged there.
Well, I'm just interested in, because, we were talking earlier on about studios. We're both total studio heads, obviously. And what was it like at Channel One? If you could describe it, like this is what Channel One was like. I'd love to
I would
know.
say Channel One was located right in the heart of the ghetto, off Maxfield Avenue in Swettenham Road. And it's totally different to what you would see in a British studio. You go into the yard at Channel One, and before you actually go in the studio, there's a yard, and there's going to be a guy sitting on the gate. Zebby is going to allow you in or not. And then as soon as you go in, there's going to be a pot of food cooking, and there's going to be guys playing dice, and people going in and out. It's nothing like what you would imagine a British recording studio to be like at all. It's like a big family school kind of atmosphere.
And then when you go in the actual building it's in, physically, what was it like in Channel One?
They had air conditioning in there, so it was quite cool inside. It was always quite dark, I remember. It was always dark in the studio,
Was it like windowless? Both
there was no
windows?
No, I don't remember any windows in there, no. So, the studio, the actual control room was quite small. You could just about get all the recording machines in there because they had several different types of recording equipment machines, from 2-track to 4-track, and then eventually the 16-track. So everything was cramped up in there. They had the famous API console in there. And
these things all give out a lot of heat as well. You've got these machines. They're all like, using a lot of electricity and giving out a lot of heat. So.
You'd have people in there smoking like hell, be full of smoke a lot of the time. Some people would be eating. I remember behind the console there was a kind of like a sofa where you could sit. You could sit down between there and the glass into the view into the studio. It was just a different kind of atmosphere to what you would get in a British studio.
And then you've got like a slightly bigger room, which is the recording room where they have the drums and where the musicians would play.
Yes. But again, the musicians would be... A lot of times, recording would take place quite quickly. Not much rehearsal. The drummer would start, or the keyboard. The piano would find the keys, maybe to someone who's going to sing something. They'd find some keys. They'd start banging a couple of chords out, and then Flabber would get a bass line, and then they'd start up, and they'd run through half of it, and then they'd roll it, and the tape would start moving, and they'd take it like that, mistakes and all.
And when you got musicians of that caliber in a studio that's like fine tuned like that, then because I was going to ask like what you think, why do you think Channel One created this magic? I mean, what is it? Is there a thing they did?
I would say, in fact, I remember talking to Byron Lee one time about it, and he said to me, Channel One was an accident. In fact, Jojo never forget. He always used to ask me, "What did Byron Lee say to you, Martin?" But yeah, I mean, I don't think it was an accident purely, but yes, there's a certain amount of a combination of factors that came together to create the magic that went on in there. It was its location for one. So you had a lot of the ghetto youth coming in there, and they got a lot of talent and innovation. Then you had the circumstances, like the piano was very seldom in tune, so that created a character to the rhythm that they were recording in there. There was the console that they used, the API console, a combination different factors, you know.
And then I guess on top of that, you put these amazing musicians in there.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's a killer combination. It's
Yeah,
like proper
yeah,
gear and
yeah.
then like proper musicians. And I guess there can't have been many other sort of like white British people hanging around in Channel 1 back in the
there
day.
was sometimes there was a guy. I remember there was an American guy, a white guy, that used to sometimes play guitar in there. I can't think what his name was. He had long hair and glasses. And Jojo told me one time that what's the guy that does Virgin Records? I forgot. Branson came down there. But apparently Branson came in there.
Branson in the ghetto.
Yeah, exactly. He came down to find out what they were doing, and he didn't get a very warm reception, apparently.
It's like the longevity of what they created, of like this, the fact that it's still, you know, to my ears at least, still sounds amazing.
But you know, at the time, we never thought that would ever last long. No. We didn't think anything of it at the time.
And many other kinds of music in other studios didn't last the test of time. There's something like, you know, extra magical about this reggae music from that era. And with your own sort of career, then, you know, most people know you as like a songwriter, lyricist, producer.
Yeah.
So when did you start like songwriting, vocalizing and producing yourself?
I wanted to do something myself. And obviously, I come from a privileged background in Jamaica, you know. So I was very fortunate that my parents allowed me to have a little room in the house, which is uptown, in a nice area in Kingston. And I was able to start. I just bought a little 4-track TIAC 334OS.
They're the ones,
You remember that? I had a little 1/4-inch TIAC, and I had a little ITAM mixing console, about, I think it was 12:2. And with that, and I had a little Grampian reverb. And with those very limited equipment and some mics, like I could string up a drum set and mic it up very basically. And that's how I started to do it, you know.
You'd mic up the drums at home when you're...
They'd go in the garage. They'd go in my mum's garage to get the reverb sound.
And this is you playing the drums.
I had to play everything. In those days, there was no technology. You had to play everything live.
And how did you learn this stuff? Because it's like, you know, we were talking yesterday in the studio about playing drums, and it's like in my head I can play drums because I program them, but I can't physically play them at all.
Okay, the skill of playing a drum I got from when I was in the Scouts. Remember, I said I was in the band,
yeah, no,
so I already
right.
had that skill was there. But I didn't know how to play a bass, and someone gave me a bass. I had to play around with it for quite a while before I could get a decent sound out of it. And I remember in Channel 1, they used to put the bass direct into the console. They never record it through a microphone. For all of this, when I was also in the Scouts, before that, actually, when I was younger than that, my mother sent me to piano lessons.
Okay, well, that's going to give you that grounding.
So I had the
music.
piano, the key.
Yeah.
I could play the piano. My fingers could move on the piano as well.
Also, that gives you an understanding of like what a note is and a scale is, and those like even it's rudimentary stuff, just some doorway into like what music is.
Yes, I would agree. I think that was the foundation for me, was learning the piano. Yeah.
So it's fair to say that like. Because again, it's something I talk to a lot of people, a lot of the guests on the podcast about, because I'm so into the studio, is kind of, for some people it's kind of boring and whatever, but like for me it's heaven. But it sounds like, you know, it's fair to say that you obviously like the studio and messing around with sounds.
That's what started it all. I was more interested in learning how to record and get a decent sound onto tape. That was my first objective. And I was so disappointed because I would make a recording and then I'd put something from Channel 1 on, and I'd think, oh my God, I sound nothing like it at all. Actually, a lot of people said, you do sound like it. What they used to say to me is that the way you're playing the rhythm sounds like it. It's just that you haven't got the same wideness of the dimensions that you know Channel 1 has, but you've got the same playing style. You've definitely got the style, and I don't know where that came from.
I think it's good to aim high as well. Like, I think a lot of people aim kind of too low, really. And if you're listening to like the best Channel One and saying, why doesn't it sound like that? It's only going to spur you on to try and make it sound good.
I'm telling you, you know it. I mean, you just want to buy more equipment. You see the kind of stuff they've got in Channel One. I mean, I couldn't go out and buy a 16-track Ampex like what they had in there. I couldn't do that.
Because people, the kids of today, but no, people these days, won't realise how expensive that equipment was. Like a proper professional mixing desk, a proper multi-track microphones, even the wires, like everything was top dollar back then.
Yeah, you'd be looking at probably today's money. You'd be looking probably about 100 grand. 100,000.
Just get a laptop and some software and you're off.
Exactly, and you're off. Yeah, but it doesn't. You see, this is my argument. It doesn't sound like that. When you put it on a sound system, you can hear the difference in the dynamics.
That's it. Those old tunes just kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah. They've stood that test of time.
Yeah.
And obviously, the other thing people know you for, and probably I would say most people know you more, is your voice and your lyrics. When did all that start?
That started by accident, because I'd make these rhythms and then I would think, I'm going to put a song over it just so I can get a feel of how it might... And I would just get these songs that were nothing like what everybody else was doing. I would get lyrics that are just not what people are singing about,
But it's still, I think, your voice has a connection to a lot of the reggae classics, though, and just the approach...
Yeah.
Lyrically, obviously, the sort of use of like parable and storytelling and sort of poetry, but also just physically how you do it. It's got a link to Laxley Castell and all these other sort of classics at the time. Yeah,
definitely. I obviously you hear the people in the studio in Channel One the way they're singing, and you think, when I first started singing, I thought I sounded a bit like Fred Locks. The tone of my voice, and then you kind of start to move into that kind of it. You think, I'm good. I sound like this particular person, so I'm going to try and imitate that person.
And do you think having like a microphone in a basic studio allowed you to listen back and kind of keep working on it?
Yes, definitely.
Own your craft.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. You play yourself back through the monitors and you think, oh, that sounds awful. I need to work on that. And you just keep on working, developing. That's what you have to do.
But I think that's important to have that ability to say, oh, that sounds awful, because some singers don't. They just think everything they do sounds great, and it's much better to be critical.
Never been happy with how I sound, to be honest with you. It's never sounded right to me.
It sounds very good to me, definitely.
Yeah, I know, but...
But also, what you're singing about, it's like, I'm really interested in lyrics, and so how did you come into like writing? And
I realised that roots music, particularly, it was a very powerful form of transport to put kind of prophetic messages across to people, to try and make people aware of the reality of what's going on around them. So that's why it went into that kind of dimension. I thought, I'm not going to just sing love songs about girls. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick more with this, biblical kind of prophetic, because it's message, and this is a wonderful music, particularly when it's roots music and you've got a very heavy bass line talking behind the rhythm. And the rhythm is sparse, so the vocal is elevated above the lyric. Everybody can hear clearly what you're saying. So you need to make use of that.
What about like the sort of, again, the longer I do it, the more I'm interested in the sort of discipline of like rhyming and saying a lot with like quite a few words.
Well, you know what, it's funny you should say about the rhyming. You know how I used to do it? In fact, I still sometimes do it. I used to get a piece of paper and write A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, put all the letters of the alphabet down. And then I would say, at the end of the line is the word road. And then I would go through all the letters, toad, code, until I could find a lyric that I thought was suitable to rhyme with the last line. And then I would, put it like that.
So, but they're like they're the techniques you need to hone that in. So it's like it's all working, and because I mean some singers do stuff that doesn't rhyme and it works out
it works
fine.
still
it's more,
because the tone of the yeah.
But that sort of that like discipline of like
yes,
it's like a kind of poem.
Something like a poem. I kind of developed that. Eventually, as you keep on working, you develop your own style, your own way of writing, your own, which everybody begins to recognise after a while.
And who are you influenced by? I mean, is there anybody whose words and lyrics or writing that you really liked?
I can't say that the lyrics are. It's more the tone of the voice. Definitely Horace Andy was a big influence for me when I was younger. Fred Locks. The lyrics, no, I think I've always just been what I want to say, not follow what they might be talking about, you know?
I guess you've always had an interest in like politics and history because
yes, very much,
because that comes out in the lyrics, definitely.
Very much, definitely, very much, yes. And again, because I'm a European in a kind of a setting that is not Europe, I guess. It becomes controversial and it makes people listen a little bit. They just might pay that little bit more attention when you're saying something. I'm not even singing about. I'm singing about the history of Jamaica, maybe the what's happened. You know, I'm describing sometimes the legacy of what's happened. I like to sing a lot about the psychological damage that's taken place. Not just singing about the history and telling it as a story, but also the psychological damage. It's how it's affected people in a psychological way.
And how did you sort of pick up on that? Because some people are just blind to all that stuff, and like nowadays, there's so you just Google anything, you get information instantly. But like you're talking about writing stuff back in the day. That's like there wasn't so much access to that information. So. It's a tricky question.
Tricky question, but it developed over time and reading and studying history, realizing that particularly when I live here in England, you can see that a lot of people have difficulty talking about aspects of history. They find it uncomfortable to talk about it, you know? You can see a lot of people feel uncomfortable to talk about slavery, colonialism, all those kind of things.
Staring you in the face, your whole upbringing, I guess, if you're there as a young person.
I've lived amongst it and seen the effects of that, what it's done to people, you know?
And I think that's what gives your music that sort of quality that's made it last. Is some people can try and sing that kind of stuff, but if you've seen it, you've seen no shoes on your feet, you've kind of seen that kind of stuff that's going on, then it's like... It's your own personal take, I guess.
Yeah, totally. It's just it's the controversy which I want to bring into the music. It's art to be controversial. So this is why I like to focus on those kind of songs and those subjects.
Well, speaking of songs and subjects, I mean, if we like fast forward a bit to, I guess like back in the UK. And then, like, where I became aware of you, which is where a lot of people, especially people my age, did, is tunes like Wicked Rule. Now, that's made, like, here in UK, I guess. So you kind of come back and, like, got involved in music here, I guess.
Well, yeah, I was able to carry on and develop the studio and develop the singing and just carry the whole thing on. And the equipment got better. At that time, I was working with a guy called Jar Reg from Jar Works. So we were able to get the production and everything in, and that's why that tune was the way it sounds. It's got a kind of a unique sound to it. It's the horns and everything, It's
very unique, and also unique, like chord structure, and it's definitely it's a stepper track that's like an anthem for the sound system, but it's also it's got something else going on as well.
One of my loves is jazz music, and also Latin American. I think the chords in that were a bit kind of Latin, Cuban kind of.
And the horns as well, definitely. They've got that kind of Mexican
style. So that influence is there.
there's just so many tracks you've been involved in, but some of the more popular ones, I guess things like Ignorance and Poverty. It's like no holds barred lyrically, and obviously that came quite a bit later, I guess, than Wicked Rule.
A lot of the time I'm singing about the situation in Jamaica and about the Jamaican government, what's going on there, and then you find people in Brazil can relate to that, and you realise people all around the world can relate to that.
When it comes to like recording and stuff, you're still involved in like analog and vintage recording and doing it in the old way.
I still do a lot of it in the old way. I don't use analog tape anymore. It's too expensive. I've still got the machine there. I like the spring reverbs. That gives the same channel one reverberation sound on the snare, and that just gives it that kind of linkage to channel one. Yeah.
It's interesting, like, because there's obviously so many tunes you've done, but things like Urban Style that you did for the French guys is like that's your voice on something that's really like contemporary and different, and but boy does it work,
I remember traveling to Lyon to do that in France, probably about 12-15 years ago. It's quite a long time ago, but it's got a bit of a story to that, actually.
It always is.
Yeah, because when we finished it sounded great, and then the guy that I can't remember his name now, but the following morning he was supposed to get up early and take me to the airport, and he'd been drinking, and I was all ready to go, and I was waiting for him to come and pick me up from the hotel, and he didn't turn up. Anyhow, eventually he came like 2 hours later, and I could tell he'd been drinking. And I said to him, listen, the plane's probably already gone. You should have been here at 6 and you've come here at 8. Anyway, he took me to the airport, and sure enough, the plane had gone. Anyway, the only way out of it, he had to buy me a first-class ticket on a British Airways flight back to London.
It's the only way for Martin Campbell to travel, surely.
Well, of course, yeah.
But that's, it's interesting you talk about that side of things, because most people don't get to see what happens involving travelling and everything, and they just hear the records or see the shows, but it's like, it can be quite crazy once you leave the house.
Absolutely. I'll be honest with you. I love doing the festivals. It's lovely to see the people that appreciate your music in front of you. It's wonderful. But oh boy, the travelling, I just don't like it at all now. I don't enjoy it anymore. I've been kind of glad that, there's been a lockdown.
You want to tell me about some of the places that you've been as well? Because you do travel a lot with the music.
I've done most of Europe. I've done Brazil, Mexico, of course, America. Yeah, I mean, I haven't done much in the UK.
The kind of music that you make, it's similar to the kind of situation I'm in, where it's like it's played by the sound systems. If you want to hear that kind of music, you're going to go and check, Shaka or, Abashanti Iration, whatever. So there's less call for producers or vocalists or whatever to play, whereas in Europe, there's much more of a kind of people are invited.
Totally. And now comes the controversial bit that I have to say. Music has always had what I call third-party interlopers, people that you have to pass through in order to get your music out to an audience. In the case of the kind of music that you and I are doing, it has to go through a sound system, because that's where people are going to really first hear your music. But I don't believe my music gets played by the big four, what I call the big four sound systems in this country. I don't believe it gets played, because it's not going in the tempo that they are all playing at the moment. It's just not. My music has always stayed true to the one-drop roots style, whereas what most people are listening to at the moment is this kind of stepping type of music with a straight 4 kick drum going. And I understand that. I understand it's easier for Europeans to dance to that beat than to be swinging their hips, like in the Caribbean, to the one-drop beat, I understand that. So But unfortunately, I don't fit into that.
And things change, don't they? Because even in the 90s, it's like I was a big fan of what I consider to be the last good period of like Jamaican music, Exterminator and Red Eyes and Star Trail, all these great labels putting out kind of one drops that all had that kind of swing, but still sounded modern. And it's like, and you'd hear those in a dance, you'd hear them everywhere, but it's almost entirely been like eradicated by this steppers, and which I love the steppers. That's kind of what I started out doing. But there's definitely a sort of like a clubbification kind of thing that's happened, and that makes those tunes, like you're talking about, the one drop kind of swing tunes, they just don't get a look in like they used to.
No, not at all. But one of the things that's happened with my music is because I haven't moved away, I've stuck with the tradition, it's now made this kind of music standing out from everything else. It's starting to stand out now. And a lot of people are listening to it and thinking this is different. And I get comments on Facebook and, where people say, it just sounds authentic what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing. Other people have said to me, you just remain authentic to what you're doing. Because I do discuss it sometimes with certain people. They might be listening to this program right now.
People are.
They know who they are, and we've had quite long discussions about me staying authentic. I have tried to stick to what I want to do and not get taken in by any particular fashion at the time or anything. But yeah,
I think there's a couple of things. I'd say about that, which is that there's loads of smaller sessions happening all over the place where maybe they are playing your tunes as well, where it's kind of, there isn't that like, we have to hype it up kind of vibe.
Right.
But also people are so clearly still listening to your music and it's still resonating with people.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like you can't keep it down.
Exactly. I don't understand why people are. It's not really sounds anything like what's going on out there.
It's the timeless nature of it, isn't it? And because you've been running a label like for a long time, I guess. And what's it like, right? Well, I know all of what it's like running a label. I've been doing it myself for donkey's years, but I wonder what
It's a lot of hard work. But we have the tools now with the internet where we can distribute our own music, and we can get the money. There's nobody intervening in between telling you what your music is worth and what the market value is for your music. It's not there anymore. Now I can ask people to pay what I feel is the true value, the amount of effort and work and time that's gone into making something. There's nobody else there dictating. So this is a big help for a lot of artists now.
Yeah, that's it. I agree. Being able to just control what you do and like deal with it in the way that you want to deal with it.
And the result of that is that now I have facilities to be able to issue a lot more records. I see people want vinyl, and that's what I'm going to concentrate on.
That's it, because you definitely seem to be still committed to the world of vinyl, which is like shows no sign of going away.
No, it's not going away. We've got big plans for a lot more to come yet.
And how is it for someone like yourself that's had such a long career when you see, like, say, young people enjoying your music? You go to a festival and you get to sing and people enjoy it, or people contact you who are kind of, young enough to be your kids or even younger. It's kind of, I wonder what that's like.
It's a beautiful thing. Trust me, it's fantastic. I find it very easy to connect to young people as well. So it's beautiful to see young people reacting to it. It makes me feel youthful still, It makes me feel that what I'm doing is worthwhile.
I think music's one of those things that can keep you young forever as well, because you've still got that playing kind of thing. And what kind of stuff are you working on? Anything at the moment? I mean, what kind of stuff can we be looking out for in the future?
I've been at the moment I've been building some rhythm tracks.
You're still building them yourself? You're like producing and building them yourself? I find that's the only way. I've tried many times to sing over other people's rhythm, and I just can't get any
the vibe just doesn't come there. It's probably the chords, something, or the tonation of the instruments. They're not using a real piano maybe, or the drums don't sound, they sound like, the modern kind of drum sound. Something about it doesn't have that inspiration for me to start getting the lyrics, How do
you get your inspiration
to
sing?
Well, I don't know where it comes from. I don't. It just comes from somewhere. Certain things will influence me, and then a song will come together. But I have to be thinking about things. Maybe I watch something on the TV and I want to comment on it, or I want to make a song about a situation that's going on in the world today. It's hard to pinpoint where these things come from.
The thing is, we're still living in a world where so many things are completely wrong and kind of getting worse. I don't want to be negative, but it's like, there's some crazy stuff going on. So I think if you are like a lyricist and a writer, there's like, there's a lot of stuff to write about.
There's a hell of a lot of stuff to write about. Yes. The work is still ongoing. There's a lot of work to be done. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. I love that statement.
Well, that brings me on to sort of, as I sort of tie up the interview at the end, is like I ask everyone this same question, which is the Book of Dub question. And I've got this big book. It's getting bigger all the time. Got some great names in it. And I'm going to write Martin Campbell. And what would you want written next to your name, something to be associated with?
A controversial roots lyricist who produces his own music.
Nice. I think that sums up what you do from what I see, pretty much.
Great.
Thanks for joining me and Martin for this 28th episode of the Life in Dub podcast. Don't forget to visit the website lifeindub.com if you want to listen back to any previous episodes, or if you want to pick up any of the Gold Disc Scoops reissue series. As ever, if you enjoy the podcast, please tell people about it and share it around. It all helps to get these special stories out to more and more people. If you want to get in touch, just email me, vibronics@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you all again in 2 weeks for the next Life in Dub podcast.